Welcome to another 4-Minute Friday. This is the chance for me to answer some of your questions which you've been asking on lots and lots of the previous videos, and I've selected some of the questions out there that I think most of you will find interesting, because some of the topics are quite specific and some are a little bit vague, but ones that will apply to different venues. Now, the first question that I get asked almost on a daily basis on this channel is, am I going to continue filming live match fishing videos? The answer to that is yes. If you do love watching live match fishing films, then there are already about 75 or 80 already right here on this channel for you to watch. So head on over to that live match fishing playlist where you can watch them all there back to back if you wish. But we are continuing to produce live match fishing films throughout the rest of this year, and I'm hoping to start that within the next few days, so hopefully you're going to enjoy some of those new matches. Now, the first question that really came up from the back of one of our previous 4-Minute Fridays was from Jeff, and he just basically says, and he asks, do we generally have an initial idea, an initial plan about how we're going to approach a peg before a match? And the answer to that is, more often than not, yes. You know, you might have an idea of how you're going to tackle a peg or tackle a match 2 or 3 days before you even get there. However, there are some venues and some occasions and some scenarios where you might not know how you're going to start the match even 5 minutes before the match starts, because you might be looking at different features within the peg or things that might influence your decision. So if I was going to go to a venue where I'm fishing for bream, for roach on a reservoir, for example, then any sort of a peg like this, where you know you are going to be faced with open water, then I will have an area where I've fed it for bream, and that could be in the deeper water, it could be in a quieter area. So for example, if you was going to fish say 30 meters, that could be your main area. So that's the main area where you're going to feed for bream, for example, and that would be the area where you would feed. You put some worms in there, casters, maggots, whatever your chosen baits are. So that would be a line there. It's quite common as well for us to have a second line in, when that could be one that can target anything, and generally that would more often than not be a little bit shorter than the main line. So you could have a line in at anything from 15 to 20 meters. Let's say it's 15 meters, so you could have a line there, and that is the line that is your small fish line. Okay, so that's your line where you're going to target anything. This could be your main bream line, so that's the line where you're going to target bigger fish. All right, and offsetting them is very, very important. So if you are going to be fishing multiple lines, Jeff, or different areas, if you've got the space to do it, try and offset them. Offsetting basically means that when you're fishing the 30-meter line and you're retrieving your feeder, you're not retrieving that feeder through your shorter line. You know, it's just trying to use a little bit of watercraft, a little bit of thought really, and just trying to make this 15-meter line as strong as it possibly can be without it getting disturbed. And on the flip side of that, obviously when you're fishing your 15-meter line, that is not interfering with your 30-meter line, but obviously that's not going to happen because it's a shorter line. So just offset your lines wherever you can. Now, another line which is a line that it's a line that I try and put in wherever I possibly can, and that is a line which we refer to as a throwaway line, and that can be a line that you're going to feed with a different bait. So it could be bigger baits, for example. So in this particular scenario you've got here, you've got a bream line there that you're going to be feeding that with ground bait, with maggots and casters. You've got a second line here, a 15-meter line, which could be for small fish. So you could be fishing with maggots on there, it could be pinkies, casters, a smaller feeder, smaller baits, where you're just going to try and catch anything while you're nurturing this main bream line. And you know, there are venues where I will put another line in which is a throwaway line, and that could be anywhere in your swim where it's a little bit quieter, where it's out of the way, and more importantly in an area where it's not going to interfere with your 30-meter line or your main line. Okay, so it could be in this area, for example, this area here, over to your right in this scenario. All that area there is going to be a quiet area. Okay, but you've also got quiet areas here and here, and they could be areas there where you're going to feed them with different baits for bigger fish. So you could feed, say for example, you could feed here with pellets and corn, and that's a complete throwaway line. If you don't get any bites on it, if you don't catch any fish on it, then that's fine. It's not interfered with your other two lines. However, if the fish are hungrier than what you think, if there are some bigger fish around that do want those baits, then by putting a line in like that, it just gives you a chance of having a run of fish, particularly later on in a match as well. And that's a line that may only work for you 20-30% of the time. But if it does work, it's the kind of a line that can go on to win you the match. My only word of caution to you is that these quieter areas here, if you're going to use these as throwaway lines, just be very, very careful, because these lines are potentially encroaching on and further out than your main 30-meter line. So I wouldn't recommend that, because you know they could quite easily interfere with your main 30-meter bream line. You could be splitting your fish, as they say. So if that's going to be a scenario that you're faced with, if you still want to feed these areas here, perhaps you might be better off pushing your main bream line out to 50 meters, so that's your longest line, so it's not going to fall victim to these lines that are going to be further out, if that makes sense. The other scenario, Jeff, as well, is when you might be fishing a commercial. Sometimes you might be looking at the conditions that you're faced with, and that is, you might be looking at the wind direction, you might be looking at where other anglers are going to be fishing in relation to you, either side of you. You may be looking at, are there any fish showing, are there any fish jumping? If so, where are they? You know, and on some venues, particularly on commercials, you might not have a clue what your peg is going to be like. On commercials, you can have a wide variety of pegs. There could be narrow, wide, there could be reed beds there, lily beds, you might have an island there. How far away is the island? Is it a pole range? Is it feeder range? All those sorts of things. You can't make decisions about how you're going to tackle venues like that before you actually get to your peg. Okay, so this match plan here, or this initial approach that I've kind of demonstrated here, is basically, that lends itself to open water type venues that are pretty much, you know, the pegs are uniform with the exception of the depth as well. So as regards the depth, you probably know about this, Jeff, just have a good plumb round with a bomb if you can. By doing that as soon as you get to your peg, by putting a bomb on, counting how long it takes the bomb to hit the bottom, that's going to help you build up a mental picture of what your swim's like. And quite often when you do that, that can solve a lot of these and give you answers to a lot of these questions anyway, because it may highlight that close in, for example, out to 10 meters may be really, really shallow. However, on the flip side of that, it might be really, really deep. So by highlighting and spotting features like that in your swim, it might help you make a better decision about where you might actually be setting up your lines. So you've also asked about changing. When would you change from this match plan? Well, one of the key things obviously is if you're not catching anything. But it's very difficult to know how your swim is actually performing unless you actually know what's been caught either side of you. So for example, if this approach here that we've set out here is working and you've caught 5 bream after an hour, then that might be an absolutely fantastic start, you know. However, if the angler at the next peg's caught 10 bream, or the one on your left has caught 15 bream, then perhaps your 5 bream isn't so good, so maybe you do have to change something. And that could be a feeding approach. You might need to step up what you're feeding, you might even need to move lines, but you will only know how your 5 bream catch is performing, or how well it's doing, as a benchmark in relation to the anglers either side of you. And this is why we're always talking about how important it is to be aware of what's happening around you. If you've got your 5 bream and your angler on your right hasn't caught any, and him on your left's only caught 1 or 0, then yes, your plan's working, so you don't need to change anything. It's just being very aware of what's happening around you. It's about being very aware about how good or bad you are performing as an angler. You know, if you're missing bites, then you need to sort that out. You know, if you're getting line bites, you need to sort that out. You know, you need to find out what that problem is. So as regards changing, ideally, you know, in the perfect world, you don't need to change. You don't need to change your swims. It's just a case of nurturing them and rotating them and feeding them correctly. But like I said, keep an eye out on what's happening around you, because that'll help you make a better decision about how good or bad your initial approach is working. There have been so many questions over the last few weeks, and I'd love to answer all of them if I possibly can. And some of them are direct scenarios that I've been faced with in the past, and that's why, you know, it's nice to share my experiences with you, to just kind of put in context some of the issues and some of the questions that you've got. So I hope you've enjoyed this little bit of an insight into Jeff's question, which is one that is pretty much transferable across lots of different venues. And if you'd like me to answer any of your questions, or just share some of my experiences related to some of the issues that you've had in your fishing, please pop them in the comments below. And if you'd like to see more videos in this series where I get the opportunity to answer some of your questions, please give this video a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more videos from this channel, please don't forget to hit subscribe, and I really look forward to seeing you next time.